the situation changes throughout, as you know, since this has started in March. The other thing I wanted to mention is that if you have personal questions about your child, please, and they're not answered either through this information session or other sessions that will be coming up, please be sure to reach out to your building administration. We're here for you. We know this is really hard. We're parents. I have a college student at the University of Delaware. You know, my colleagues have children, so we know exactly what you are going through. Many of my colleagues that are on this panel have young children too. So we want to partner with you. We want to help you to make the best informed decision for your particular situation. So please do not hesitate. If you need that extra support, your assistant principals, your principals are there for you, and they tap into us, so we are there as well. So we're going to move forward into the presentation. Dr. Gosh, if you could all right, so what are we going to be covering today? So it was very, very clear throughout all the surveys that we did that health and safety, PPE, social distancing, maintaining confidentiality, cohorts, all of those critical things, and the academic delivery of academics is really critically important to our parents through the numerous surveys. So today we're going to be highlighting several things. We want to talk to you about what we're preparing for facilities, transportation, child nutrition, curriculum instruction and assessment. We do have some pictures, so we want to bring some things to life as much as we can in this virtual environment. So what we'll and we want to just kind of walk through like the day in the life of a Brewster Bear. So what will the daily experience of your child look like, whether you are choosing the hybrid model or the 100% remote model? So I want to introduce, we have the panelists here, and very, very critical people that took part right from the get-go, right from the beginning when this outbreak started, early March. As you know, we've started this journey in March. So we have with us this morning, and they will be available as we go through the questions that you sent in ahead of time. And just so you know, they were every single part of our plan. They have been intricately involved in. So Dr. Louis Casaro, who we call our own Dr. Fauci, is the medical director for the district, who is, I have to say, I've been in several districts, outstanding. Mr. Frank Gugliari is our regional safety coordinator for Putnam, Northern Westchester, BOCES. Frank is a huge part of the Safety, Health, and Emergency Planning Committee that has been in the district long before I got here. And he has been an unbelievably invaluable resource throughout this process. Of course, I'll be on. We have Dr. Michelle Gosh, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Mr. Victor Carlson, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. And Dr. Elizabeth Kennedy, the Director of Pupil Personnel Services. Also, parents, I want you to know that also with us today are our principals. They are on, and our directors, because we want you to know that we are here to support all of you, and we are a true team, an excellent team, and we want to make this as thorough and complete as possible. Okay, so Dr. Gosh, you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so how did this start? We started this process a long time ago. And before I talk about the process, I just want to talk about how we solicited feedback. So we had our subcommittee memberships, our focus groups that were directed by the governor. We have parent and guardian surveys, student surveys, and staff surveys, and the awesome regional thought exchange, which gave us not only the flavor and the thoughts in the entire region, the Lower Hudson region, but also specifically what were Brewster parents looking for. And it clearly, as I said at the beginning, came out to be health and safety, PPE, social distancing, maintaining confidentiality, cohorts, and the digital delivery of and the instruction in the classroom. So let's get into how we got to this point. Okay, so how did we arrive at our determinations? This was a huge, huge effort. So we, on a weekly basis, we consult with the Putnam County Department of Health. They played a huge part in all of our many decisions. As you know, the guidelines were constantly changing. We did get guidelines that we had to follow from the Department of Health. We also consulted with our school medical director, Dr. Casaro, with any decisions that we made. Dr. Casaro was able to join several of our subcommittees. He sat on our Safety, Health, and Emergency Planning Committee, as well as Frank, and they were intricately involved in every single decision. As you know, not only do we get guidance from the Department of Health, which always trumps any guidance that we get from the New York State Education Department, because health and safety first. We let the health and safety experts guide our decisions, because that is not our expertise. So we did need to look at the New York State guidance, and we had to look at the Department of Health guidance, and both of those documents were very, very important to follow for all of our subcommittees as we created our reentry plan. The subcommittees also met. We had folks from all walks of life. We had staff, administration, parents, community members, administration, as I said. All of those folks sat in on those subcommittees. Some of them, one was transportation, the other one was digital learning, teaching and learning. The list went on, and we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the presentation. And we continue to consult with Frank Guglieri to make sure that all our decisions were on target as well. Just so you know, in addition, twice a week, I get on the phone with superintendents from Putnam, Northern Westchester, BOCES region, and also the Lower Hudson region. We started this as soon as the pandemic started. So we were comparing notes, we were discussing, and you will see that there are several districts in the region that are using the hybrid model. Remember, every district is different. Every district has different enrollment. Every building schematic is different. So we had to make sure that our plan was safe. We had the 6-foot distance for students in the classrooms, and that we had enough space, and what would be the maximum capacity of our students. So all of our decisions also were in conjunction, not only with superintendent colleagues, but other colleagues of business, human resources. So lots and lots of input and collaboration. We also have a faculty advisory council. We collaborated with all of the bargaining units to make sure we weren't forgetting anything. We just kept saying, are we forgetting anything? Is there anything more we need to do? So I want to thank all of our bargaining units, SEIU, the BTA, our Administrators Association, the list goes on, for collaborating with us and offering input into this reentry plan. So we're going to start off with facilities. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Victor Carlson, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. Victor?
Hi, good morning. And as Dr. Banlow mentioned, there were so many people involved in developing these plans. Glenn Fryer, our Director of Facilities, has been incredible throughout this process, doing a lot of research. We're getting bombarded with different products and sales pitches pitched towards us. And he's done an incredible job doing the research and working with Frank Guglieri from BOCES. So thank you, Glenn Fryer, who's also, of course, on this call this morning. So in terms of facilities, if you could skip to the next slide. Really, there are 3 main points that we want to make sure that we make. So frequency is key. So we know that as soon as a surface is touched, it becomes soil. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those high-touch surfaces frequently throughout the day, such as counters, door handles, light switches, railings, cafeterias, bathrooms, and things of high-touch variety. We're going to be bringing in additional staff throughout the school day to make sure that we're addressing those needs, of course, more frequently than in the past. So we'll be providing additional staff during the day to make sure that those areas are constantly attended to. The next thing is cleaning products. So we're using, in addition to our general purpose cleaning agents, which already had resistance to coronavirus, or I should say, we're able to treat coronavirus. We also are using hospital grade products in the evening. These, of course, are safe for students, safe for the touch, but we're going to make sure that we're using those in addition to our general purpose cleaning agents. But there's no magic potion, so there's no greater potency that's applied to these cleaning products. Again, it really goes back to frequency. Next slide. And technique. So we actually are using a Clorox 360 electrostatic sprayer. I embedded a link to a video just to kind of show what it looks like, because folks may not be familiar with what it does. It sprays a mist on the surface. The mist attaches to soiled surfaces and disinfects them. So fast forward to maybe a minute 45, and this is just an example of how it works being sprayed on a surface. Again, the product attaches itself to any soiled surfaces and of course disinfects it. So we're going to be using these each evening in our classrooms and throughout our school buildings. All right. We're also using in our bathroom a Kaivac unit, which is a touchless unit that allows for pressure washing and then a wet vac of bathroom facilities. Again, it allows us to treat those areas. Dr. Gosh, you don't have to open that one up. It allows us to treat those surfaces without even having to touch them. Finally, we'll be using microfiber cloth as opposed to traditional rags in terms of cleaning cafeteria tables and desks and things of that nature. Microfiber has been proven to be more effective against disinfecting, whereas traditional rags and cloth have not been able to remove the residue that you're cleaning. And just a few other general notes, and this is actually certainly not an exhaustive list of all the things that we're doing in the schools. Hand sanitizer dispensers being installed, hand washing sinks being installed at each cafeteria, and we're going to show a couple pictures of some sinks that we installed at JFK as well as CV Star. So additional hand washing sinks, because as we know, hand washing is probably our best defense against contracting the virus. So we want to make sure that our students have an opportunity to wash their hands throughout the day, and especially before and after eating, which we'll discuss as we get into the child nutrition portion of the presentation. Age-appropriate signage being installed to encourage CDC guidelines such as social distancing. Water fountains are being replaced by bottle filling stations and cup dispensers. Also not bulleted here, but what you will see is polycarbonate, which is similar to plexiglass, clear glass, to separate different common areas where students and staff members also may be working closer than 6 feet. Moving on to transportation, what will be different about the bus this year? Many things will be different about the bus. If you can move to the next slide. So first, students will be assigned a seat at a social distance. So you see here, we outfitted one of our buses just to show what it would look like with the social distancing guidelines. Students will be in every other seat on a diagonal. So you can see going towards the back of the bus, every other seat is used in succession. And students or children who are family members, of course, will be permitted to sit with each other, and students who are not within the same family will be in their own seat. This significantly reduces the capacity of how many students we can hold on a bus, and because of that reason, we're going to have 2 loops or waves for each building. So there will be 2 morning drop-offs at JFK and CV Star and Wells in the high school. In the afternoon, there's going to be 2 dismissals from JFK, 2 from CV Star, Wells, and the high school. The rear of the bus will be seated first, and that's done intentionally so that we're limiting student contact. And then unloading will begin at the front of the bus, again, to limit student contact so they're not passing by each other. While on the bus, students will be required to wear masks. If a student doesn't have a mask at the bus stop, the driver will have masks available, temporary masks for distribution. Of course, the buses will be cleaned and disinfected after each use, and students and staff will receive ongoing training and reminders to promote social distancing and proper use of PPE and things of that nature. Moving on to child nutrition services. Next slide. So as we showed in the pictures earlier, hand washing will be required before and after eating. Again, as we have learned, hand washing is one of the most important things that we can do to prevent the spread of coronavirus. So we will be requiring hand washing before and after eating. Some of these things we actually implemented back in the winter. Contactless service. So we had removed all self-serve items such as salad bars and things of that nature. All items will now be served, and there will be no pin pads. Again, this is something that we actually implemented back in February, removing the pin pad for students having to enter their pin number into the point of sale system. That will now be taken care of by the cashiers. Students will eat in the cafeteria seated to maintain social distancing with certain exceptions. Each building's plan is going to vary to some degree. And I mentioned before we got started with Mr. Clark that we're certainly going to be evaluating each of these plans as we move forward. Because of capacity limitations, we may need spillover areas where not all students will be eating in the cafeteria. Some students will be eating in other areas. And of course, we're going to be evolving that process as we move on. Weekly meal distribution, backslide. Weekly meal distribution will continue for students who are not in school, and it will also be available for students who elect to have home remote instruction 100%.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carlson. So with some of those health and safety protocols outlined, we'll pivot a bit to some additional structures and supports that we would like to implement K-12 in order to address some of the other needs that students have in order to be successful in the 2021 school year. First and foremost, at the forefront of our decision-making is the social emotional needs of our students. Students have not attended in-person instruction since March. They are returning to us, having not probably in all likelihood not knowing the people that they're going to be, the teachers and staff that they're going to be working with. And there's a whole lot that happened to families, even if no one got sick. There's a whole lot that happened to families between March and now. So we want to make sure that the social emotional needs of our students are at the forefront of our decision making, and that we're intentional and explicit to create opportunities to do the three bullet points that are at the bottom: building community, fostering relationships, and making sure that we have structures in place where connections can be created between student to student and student to staff. The Social Emotional Learning Committee, which is co-chaired by Mr. Allen, the CB Star assistant principal, Mrs. Hernandez, the middle school assistant principal, and myself, we've been meeting every week since the middle of June, and what we have come up with is this idea of Bears Connect. So we want to make sure, again, that we're saying this is important, and then we're walking the walk to make sure that students are able to connect with one another and with their teachers. So what has been going on is building level teams have been planning some opening week activities. So you can call it a soft opening a little bit. We're not going to shove curriculum down kids' throat, the first week when they're there, but instead we're going to create developmentally appropriate activities for students and teachers to be able to do those things, to create those connections, whether they're in person or virtual. Then moving on to organizational. So we know that some of the students who were most successful during distance learning in the spring were those who had really high executive functioning skills. So they could organize themselves, they could prioritize, they could make sure that they knew what was due when. And so what we want to do is to help foster those skills for students, because quite honestly, those are life skills that you need whether you're in a virtual or a face-to-face environment. So one of the things that we're doing is we're bringing back homeroom. And you might think, who cares, that's been around forever. But the point in having a homeroom teacher is it's another adult that you're accountable to. Attendance will be taken every day, whether you're virtual or in person. It's an adult that can be there if you have questions about what the schedule might look like during the day, or if there are other sort of safety procedures that you might want, questions that you might want answered. So this is an adult and another connection for students and teachers to start their day, again, whether they're in person or virtual. One thing that the middle school and the high school is doing, and actually this week, there are teams from each of those buildings that are attending what we call AVID training. And AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. It manifests itself differently in different districts. What we see as the value, especially for next year, are these strategies that we can sort of extrapolate from this training and then we can Broosterize it, right? So things like Cornell note-taking, things like e-notebooks where students are able to organize themselves. There are metacognitive components to it. So how can students think about their thinking, right? So intentionality around these organizational skills that again will help students be successful whether they're in a virtual or a face-to-face environment. And of course, safety. This year is all about health and safety. So what we'll be able to do through the homeroom structure, through some of the trainings that we're going to do in these modules that we're going to ask students to complete before they come in, and then reinforcement and reminders at set intervals, we're going to make sure that students have the opportunities to ask questions of us and that they're reminded, because even as adults, let's be honest, we need reminders about wearing masks. It's just not part of our systems and processes yet. But we're going to make sure that we have these different pieces in place in order to support our students. All right, on to curriculum instruction and assessment. So we know that in the spring, we were building the plane when it was in the air. And while we did that, there were a lot of really good things. I want to thank all the teachers who worked so hard in order to completely change their practice and make it something that students could be successful in a digital environment. With that said, we know that there are things that we want to improve on. So the instructional design that you'll see through the next set of slides has that in mind. So we did some things well, but there were some things we didn't. So what can we do to improve? All right, so the first decision that we had to come to, and this is, this came through in the frequently asked questions as well. So why 50%? Why are we only operating at a 50% student capacity on a daily basis? So here, I'm gonna walk you through the process a little bit. We asked our principals and assistant principals, we said, here are your floor plans. Look at the square footage of each room. Now you need to go into each room, and this is what they did. They went into each room, looked at the unique characteristics of each classroom. What is usable space, what isn't? How many students are we actually able to fit in here? And then they went into non-traditional spaces, meaning non-traditional instructional spaces where you would think of, core classes. So they went into the cafeteria, they went into gyms, they looked at every nook and cranny to say, how many students can we bring in, can we house at one time? And what we are moving forward with and what we wholeheartedly believe in is that we can do this right at 50% of our student capacity, that health and safety has to guide what we do. 50% of our student body in at one time, we can make sure that they're in traditional instructional spaces, that they receive solid instruction, and that they're safe and healthy while they're here. So once we came up to that 50% capacity, now we have to say, okay, how can we make sure it's equitable? How can we make sure that we have some sort of rotation where we're having students for in-person instruction if that's what families choose to do for their son or daughter? So after much deliberation with administrators, with the teaching and learning subcommittee, we revisited this several times. We looked at what some possible rotations could be. So throughout the region, there were a lot of ideas floated. We had our own ideas. Maybe we go 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, meaning in-person, remote instruction. Maybe we do weekly. Maybe we do cohorts coming in 2 days, and then the other cohort coming in 2 days. Maybe we do A/B. And so and they all have pros and cons. None of these rotations are perfect, but what we believe is the best instructional model for students is for them to come for in-person instruction on an everyday basis. It provides some sort of consistency, it provides some structure that we believe will help students succeed academically and frankly, from a social emotional perspective. So what we came up with is cohort A. Every Monday and Thursday, you will have in-person instruction. Cohort B every Tuesday and Friday, and Wednesday is the rotation day. We actually had Monday as the initial rotation day, but we decided not to go with that because it would be too long of a time block for one cohort to be out of school. We also, and I should just say, because it seems like it wasn't clear in some of our previous communications, cohort A is, it was done by last name, K-12. Cohort A is A through LE, and cohort B is LI through Z. Now, if you're in a household that has different last names, reach out to your assistant principals or principals. We have a running list. We think we know who the students are, but it's possible we miss them. So please reach out to your principals and assistant principals. Once we receive information back about which choice people are going to choose for their son or daughter, we'll be able to then say, okay, definitively, if you're in that gray area, this is your cohort. But if you have your last name, A through LE, you're in cohort A. LI through Z, you're in cohort B. All right. Another thing that we heard from the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee and was a great idea from Dr. Zamberlin and our administrators is that we need to have a set calendar. So linked into our reentry site is, and linked calendar meaning, or a set calendar meaning for cohort A, if I need to provide childcare or get childcare for my son or daughter when they're not in person, I need to know now. I need to be able to work with friends or with childcare centers in order to make this work. So regardless of snow days, regardless of any interruption, this is the schedule we're following. On September 15th, cohort A is remote. on, let's say, June 14th, cohort A is in person. Whatever it happens to be, this is the set schedule for the year. And again, we did this with the hope that it could provide some predictability in a what feels like a very unpredictable world at this point. All right, so then moving into learning options. So now that we know we're cohorted, here are the two options that we're asking you to consider. The first is hybrid, and hybrid has been thrown a lot around differently in a lot of different ways. Hybrid means 50% in person, 50% remote. So a cohort will be in school 50% of the time, and they will be attending remote instruction 50% of the time. Please know that it's still instruction 100% of the time. And as we get through to the instructional models, you'll see what I mean. All remote. So the state education department has said that we need to provide this option for students who may be in a high-risk category, for family members that happen to be in a high-risk category, or for any parent who's uncomfortable with sending their son or daughter in. So students will, in this model, students will not attend in-person instruction at all, but it is still instruction 100% of the time. It just takes a different form. All right, so what we're asking is by next Monday for you to complete the questionnaire that was sent out to you in the beginning of the week. If you need more time, reach out to us, but it would help us get an idea of our numbers so that we can do the next 60 steps in our planning that needs to happen for a September opening. What we are asking is when you make this commitment that it's a commitment for a semester, which is basically the end of January. Here's where we're going to provide some flexibility for this. If you choose in-person instruction, and let's say circumstances in your family change, or you, throughout the region, there are conditions that you're not comfortable with, you can elect to go full remote at that point, right? But once you commit to full remote, you're committed until the end of January. We can't have full remote coming back in because we want to make sure we do this right. And at 50% capacity, we can do this, but we can't have back and forth. If you can start in and go remote, but once you're in remote, you're there until the end of January. All right, this term has also been thrown around, homeschooling. So it's really important to draw this distinction because homeschooling is a completely different thing. And I've seen very good results from some families who are wholeheartedly invested in this, and it's a good option for some students and families. But you need to know homeschooling is different than all remote. In homeschooling, you are responsible for the curriculum, instruction, and assessment, right? You work with my office in order to make sure that you submit an individualized home instruction plan, that you tell me how you're going to assess your son or daughter. But know that if you choose homeschooling, you're not working towards a high school diploma. You're not earning high school credits. But if you have questions about this, I'm happy to work through this with you and support your family. As Dr. Banlow said, this is a very personal choice, and whatever works for you and your family, we'll make sure that we support you in getting to that. All right, so let's take a look at what these models are going to look like. So we have let's start with hybrid in person. So let's say your son or daughter is, you select the hybrid model and they're getting ready to go to school. So what is their day going to look like? So prior to them entering the bus and or arriving at a school building, we're going to be asking you to sign and to submit an attestation that your child is in good health. They don't have a temperature. There'll be a whole number of variables. We're looking for a way to do that that is efficient for you and that isn't too much of a big ask in the morning. But we do need your cooperation and your partnership in submitting that, so that we know that's another check that that students that are entering the school bus or the school building, that you send them off in good condition. As Mr. Carlson mentioned,
Dr. Gosh, yes, can I just add something? If you go back to the last slide, our Director of Technology and Innovation, Mr. Jim Terlore, is looking, as you know, many of you have already signed up for Parent Square. So we want to make it, as Dr. Gosh said, as easy as possible, where there would be an app on your phone that you would fill out that form in the morning. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible, as Dr. Gosh said. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Finally got to the slide once you were done. All right, so then moving into the school bus. Some of this was described already with Mr. Carlson, but it's good to to repeat it twice. So as students enter the school bus, we're expecting them to have a mask on. If they forget theirs, it happens, the driver will have an extra supply for them. As Victor mentioned, students will be directed to a predefined seat at a safe social distance. Siblings will be asked to sit together. We'll load the back of the bus first. As we unload students, the front of the bus will be dismissed first. The principals will be working with the transportation department, and I just have to say also that Mrs. Smith, the director of transportation, has been incredible in working through all these different variables with us. And I know that she'll continue to work in partnership with the buildings to make sure this is smooth. So the building principals will work through what the staggered dismissal and arrival schedule will look like that is developmentally appropriate for our students. All right, so once students arrive at school, we're asking, all students' temperatures will be taken. As they arrive, that is another data point for us to know, okay, students are all right. Once they're in the building, they will be directed to specific areas. So if you have a high school student, you probably know that in the past, students would come in, they'd go to their lockers, they hang out with their friends in the hallway a little bit. We're not doing lockers at the middle school or high school. Middle school students can wear their backpacks around if they need to. That's been a 15-year rule that is now changing. But students are not going to be going to their lockers or congregating in their hallways. They're going to specific spaces. So it's the cafeteria or the library. You can still get breakfast, but we need to make sure you're supervised. We need to make sure that that social distancing guidelines are followed, that you're wearing your mask, all that good stuff to keep students safe. We want to give you an idea of what some of these classrooms are going to look like. Again, as much as they can be, they're developmentally appropriate, but now this is what they look like with some social distancing sprinkled in. So here we have a classroom at JFK. Here's CV Star. CV Star is unique in that most of their furniture are these tables, these two-person tables. So in order for us to make this work, we have removed one of those chairs from each of these tables, and students are then at a safe physical distance. All right, into the middle school. Then the high school math classroom, I believe, based on what this looks like. And you can see that the assistant principals and principals in partnership with their the building custodians have gone through to make sure that we're adhering to these guidelines. We wanted to give you a picture of a prototype of what we're trying to do. Victor mentioned polycarbonate dividers that we are trying to put in place. This is the high school cafeteria. If we are able to use some of these polycarbonate dividers at tables, students can actually face one another and have conversations. So we're looking at ways to have students have as typical an experience as possible while still being safe and healthy. All right, so as Victor also mentioned, we have 2 tiers of transportation waves for each school. So the principals have been very creative in figuring out ways to accommodate that, but we got it. Know that because there are 2 waves, the first students in will be the first students out. And as we mentioned, all students, staff, visitors are expected to wear masks at all times, even when they're at a safe physical distance from others. What the principals will be doing is working with Dr. Casaro and with their teachers to talk about, okay, where can we build in these mask breaks? And where does it fit naturally? Where are the safe areas to do that? What conditions sort of need to be in place in order for that to happen? So that's high on our priority list to make sure that those mask breaks are built in for students throughout the day. All right, so moving into instruction. So now, since we've cohorted, a positive of cohorting is that you have a teacher has half the number of students in front of them. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for individualized attention if students attend in-person instruction. What the state guidance has asked us to do is to cohort students within a cohort. So not A-B cohorting, but keeping a group of students in a confined space pretty much. So that's much easier at K2 and 3-5. You could argue that teaming is a way of cohorting at the middle school, but it's nearly impossible at the high school. Students have so many different individualized pathways towards graduation that you wouldn't be able to do it. So the approach that we took, especially at the secondary level, was to decrease the number of instructional periods. That way it limits the number of times students are transitioning and the number of other students that they come into contact with. You'll see these guiding principles in the all remote model and in the remote hybrid model. They're all the same. So we want to make sure, and this first bullet came directly from state ed guidance. We want regular and substantive interaction between teachers and students throughout the day. Second is what we already talked about in terms of social emotional needs. We cannot emphasize that enough. The third is a developmental approach. We need to design schedules and instructional models that will fit the needs of our growing learners. And finally, something that we heard that came through loud and clear with families on the teaching and learning subcommittee was you need to give families flexibility, especially families with younger students. And I'll talk about how we've sort of built that into the hybrid model. All right, to make sure we're on the same page, this is what we mean when we talk about synchronous instruction. So synchronous instruction is instruction that's taking place at the same time between a student and a teacher. Asynchronous means the instruction is taking place at different times. So that could be a teacher posting a video and the student viewing it at another point. Asynchronous activities are academic exercises that build on that synchronous instruction. So as we go through the next set of slides, we'll be using these terms, and this is what we're referring to. All right, so we're in the hybrid in-person mode, right? So K5, we're pretty much staying the same that we have been. K2, we're self-contained. We're with the homeroom teacher all day anyway for academics. Grades 3 through 5, we're still going to be teamed with 2 teachers. We're still working out, are the teachers going to switch? If the students switch, how do we disinfect the desk? These are details we're working through. Something that will change are special areas. They will happen. It's an important part of a holistic education. So we're figuring out ways to make it happen. Physical education, when possible, will be going outside or using the larger gym space if the capacity allows. Art and library, most likely, but this could change, most likely will be pushed into the classroom. And we're talking about, common art supplies and library books and how that all works out. And we have some information for you in the FAQs for that. And then, music instruction. So maybe it's a good time to just talk about this K-12. We met with Dr. Casaro and all the building principals, and as well as Mrs. Patty Taylor, who is our performing arts coordinator. And here's the deal. In order to sing, you have to have 12 feet of distance. So what this might look like, what a music class might look like at JFK is, let's bring that section into the auditorium. The teacher will be in the front and they can, sing their little hearts out. 3-5, we're still figuring out what the capacity of the music room could hold. If there is a 12-foot distance, then we can swing that. If not, we're going to have to, and you're going to see this throughout, curriculum is going to have to be modified in order to fit the health and safety needs. And we'll make sure we do it, and we'll do it well. Some other notes about band and chorus and orchestra. So strings, orchestra is fine to continue as long as they're 6 feet away. Band and chorus, we cannot have large group ensembles. We will be able to have some lesson groups in grades 4 through 12. All right, recess, still important. We've initially brainstormed with Dr. Casaro about how we can make this work at the K-5 level. Some factors that we're thinking about is how to decrease the number of students. If we're talking about outside, in the recess area at one time, if we're talking about an outside area, we know the transmission rate is lower than if it's inside. So what are some other, sort of mechanisms or structures that we can put in place for K-5 students? But it's an important part. They have to get out and run around, and we're going to make sure it's done in a safe way. Victor also mentioned about lunch. We are going to be able to have students eat in the cafeteria. There might be some, spillover areas depending on how the schedules end up looking, but the principals are working really hard to make sure that we allow students a change of scenery, that they can sit and eat in the cafeteria, and that they're not stuck in the, in the classroom all day. All right, grades 6 through 8, in-person model. So 6 through 8, hybrid, I'm in school. What am I doing? We're going to have fewer periods. Again, we want to limit the transitions and the pool of students that are mixing. We're going to have core academic classes for in-person instruction at the middle school. Mr. Clark and his team took a really unique approach, and I think it's right on for the developmental needs of middle school students. So when students are in person and have in-person instruction, they are going to see either math, science, English, social studies, and world language / reading teachers. This is our goal. This is what we want to make happen. And think about it. You're in a class, a teacher has 12, 13, 14 kids in front of them as opposed to double that number. So the amount of individualized attention and support is going to be, I think, is going to be great. Students will still have lunch. It'll have to look different. It can't be the entire grade eating at once in that cafeteria like we have in the past. So Mr. Clark is looking at the gym and some other areas to make that work. And there will be recess again with structures to make sure that we're safe. 9-12 in person. So still in the hybrid model. My son or daughter's attending school that day. It's my cohort's day to be there. We're looking at, again, decreasing the number of periods, making those periods longer. We're working with the BTA, and we appreciate their partnership and working this all through. And so every student will still have 8 courses, right? But not all 8 courses will meet on the same day. So that's important. So we'll explain all this to students. We'll work it all out, but know that these are the sort of the big picture ways that we're making instruction work at the high school. The high school will have 2 lunch waves with designated areas for students to eat. The students who come in first will eat lunch first, and then they'll leave. Same with the students who come in later will still eat lunch and then go. It's important to note, just a shout out to the community members who are on the K-12 Science Task Force. Mrs. Forler and her team have been able to save science labs. So even though we have fewer periods, there will still be science labs at Brewster High School. All right, so still in the hybrid model. Now we're in remote instruction. So it's your son or daughter's day to be home. What does this look like? So again, same guiding principles. K-5 remote. So one of the things we heard is that we need to have flexibility for families of younger students, especially because they're not necessarily independent learners in that they can log on and attend to instruction in a synchronous way. And the parents have said, we're going to be working every day. And so I don't know for sure that the childcare that I provide for them is going to be able to have them log on at 10 o'clock for an ELA lesson, let's say. So what we've done is we're saying, if you're in the hybrid model and it's your day to be home, there are going to be opportunities for you to connect synchronously at the same time with your teacher and with your classmates. Those times are going to be morning meeting. And then there's a block of time at the K-5 level already called intervention enrichment. So that could be a time when students are remoting in also. There's no new instruction that happens during this time, but it is an opportunity if students are able to connect synchronously with their teachers and their classmates during that time. Now, if they're in that K-5 hybrid remote model, right? So we're home. I'm able to sync in during those days, but I'm going to mostly have asynchronous instruction and activities, because when I come home from work, I'm going to sit down with my son or daughter and I'm going to help them complete the assignments and view the lessons and that sort of thing. So that will be available in the morning for families so that there's flexibility and that they're able to help our youngest learners access instruction in a remote model. So the 6-8 at the middle school, we have our homeroom. Right? So even if you're remote, you're expected, attendance will be taken, you're expected to attend this homeroom. It's another accountability device to say, get your butt up, it's time to learn for the day. In encore classes will be done synchronously. So meaning encore, PE, health, tech, art, electives, some music, right? So those are going to be classes that are going to be on the remote days for students to both sync in with teachers, but they'll also have some asynchronous activities and instruction as well. We also know, because we know middle school age learners, they need structure. So we're going to create schedules that hopefully look something like this, okay? So we know that when we're in person, we have our core classes, we start every day with our homeroom. Remote, same thing, we start with our homeroom, and we're still giving kids a schedule from, let's just say, this is probably not the time, right? But let's say 7:45 to 8:30, you have PE, okay? You're expected to log on and do what you need to do for PE. Same for the rest of these courses. Now, just because math instruction is in person every other day doesn't mean they're only having math every other day. They're still going to have math every day. What the math teachers are going to do are those asynchronous activities that extend and build on the learning from the previous day. So we're going to make sure that in the schedule, there's core work. Students know that, okay, during this time to this time, I need to be working on that assignment that was posted in Google Classroom. And then the next day when they see their teachers, they'll be accountable. They'll be accountable to that. 9-12 hybrid is probably the easiest. They still have the homeroom schedule, and basically you follow your schedule. So whatever periods run on that day, as a high school student, you're either sitting in class attending them or you're remotely attending them. If the periods do end up being longer, which we hope they are, there'll be, a minimum number of synchronous minutes. So you might not be on for the full duration of the period, but there's going to be a minimum amount of time that you're synchronous with your teacher in a remote model. Okay. And one other thing that we're really excited about is at the end of the day, every teacher is going to have office hours. So that is an opportunity. There'll be a Zoom link, a Google Meet link, and say, I'm here. Like if you have questions with your work, you need to sync in and let us know. We are also, we've talked with the teachers and we've worked this through, but not every course is going to meet every day at the high school. So there will also be, for the continuity of learning purposes, there will be work that's assigned for courses even when they don't meet. All right. Sorry, this is a lot of detail. I know it's long, but we wanted to make sure we gave you as much information as possible as we work through this. So now we're switching to the 100% all remote instruction. So if you're thinking about, okay, what choice am I going to make for my son or daughter? Switch gears. Now they're not coming in at all. So if that's the case, we'll start with the high school because it's the easiest. It's similar to what would happen if you're in person. So you have your synchronous instruction for X number of periods a day, and you have asynchronous activities for the courses that haven't met or as an extension of the courses that did meet. So you have your typical schedule, and that's what you follow. In the middle school and K-8 is where we really need more information from you about what option you're choosing for your son or daughter in order for us to make the next set of decisions. So what we're hoping and what would ideally work best is if there is a certain threshold that is met for the number of students that select all remote learning, there would be remote sections, right? So you would be meeting synchronously with your teacher every other day for core classes and encore. So it would still follow the core encore, but it would hopefully be a separate remote section. If it's not, then we'll make it work. And we'll work with teachers to make sure that they have the tools in order to be successful. And there might be some exceptions where there's not going to be a full section of students and we'll remote in, we'll figure it out. Encore class, we already talked about encore versus core. And again, the final design depends on the numbers. I can't emphasize that enough. We need more information in order to be able to make the next set of decisions. Similar with K-5. So we're making certain assumptions that if you choose the 100% remote model, that it's different from the hybrid model in that you are going to be able to make your son or daughter accessible for instruction during the school day. So what you're going to see is based on the developmental age, based on the grade level, there's going to be a certain number of synchronous minutes that would take place throughout the day, with kindergartners obviously having fewer minutes than, let's say, fifth graders. But there will be a balance, what they call blended learning, a balance of synchronous and asynchronous instruction and activities. Again, we need more information to talk about how, if we have an all remote section, or if we work this in some other way. And once those questionnaires are sent back to us, we will be able to make those sets of decisions. But know that it's our commitment that if you choose 100% remote model, there will be more synchronous instruction in order for your son or daughter to have that live interaction with your teacher. All right, so then moving now into our next steps. By Friday, the state has asked us to post our remote learning plan, which is basically what you saw here, but we'll put it in a written document. We also have to have a contact tracing and a testing plan. Those will all be posted by Friday. We also ask that you complete the questionnaire by Monday. Reach out to us to discuss any questions that you have. The principals will be running optional faculty meetings so that teachers can start to hear from the principals about what their day might look like. Mr. Carlson is working on, with his team, on informational videos for child nutrition services, transportation, and facilities. Each building principal is also going to do some follow-up work on, okay, what are some more specifics with this schedule, as well as what is, what are some additional pertinent information that you might want to know. And as we mentioned, we want to have student orientation models, hopefully some videos for parents to watch as well, in order for students to feel as though they are ready to for September, whether that's virtual or in person. Here are some existing resources that are already there. Our reentry site, which has all of this information on, will continue to add answers to the FAQs. We will continue to, we'll post on this site those 3 plans that we had just spoke about, and any other information, that any videos or anything else that you feel might be important. All right, Dr. Banlow?
Yeah, that's great, Dr. Gosh. So now we want to go through some additional questions that came in. So let's start off with some questions, and we might be tapping into Dr. Casaro, some of our other panelists, to help answer the many, many, many questions that came in from parents. So what happens when a student gets sick? So just as all of you know, we have been through this before in March. So if a child gets sick, there will be a flow chart that will need to be followed. I'm going to have Dr. Casaro speak in a minute, but all of our decisions that we make about any student, of course, is confidential. All of our decisions regarding whether we're going to close a school or close the campus are in conjunction with the Putnam County Department of Health and our school physician. So they guide us in that decision because, as you know, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an educational doctor, so we really rely on them. So Dr. Casaro, if you can kind of kick in here, are you there?
Dr. Banlow, Dr. Casaro is not on for this one, but Frank Guglieri is, Mr. Guglieri, and we could also talk through some of the protocols that we have discussed and put in our safety plan.
Okay.
Sure. If you want me to jump in, I don't mind at all.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay, sure. So good morning, everybody. So I'll just take you through a couple of things really quick, and I'll look at it very specifically and then very generally. Basically, there's a generalized protocol that everybody in every school has to follow, when a student becomes sick, right? And we actually use the term, again, I'm not a medical doctor either, but, doing all the work with the Department of Health and our medical directors, right? I'm going to use some of the lingo that they're using, and they call it presenting symptoms, right? So as this coronavirus has, evolved and we learn more and more about it, we've learned that there are certain symptoms that may lend it to be either the coronavirus or the flu or a myriad of other things, right? So right now, currently, the Department of Health is keeping a very, very low threshold, right? So if there is a child in the classroom who would present symptoms, what would happen is a phone call would go to the nurse would then do a triage following a very, very set, specific protocol. That student would then be brought to an isolation room. They would be monitored at the isolation room until they were able to be picked up. And then in conjunction and simultaneously, what would happen is a call would go out from the district to the Department of Health, and then they would guide them very specifically on what to do, on what would be needed in conjunction with the district's medical director and the nurse, and then of course, obviously the family. Now, there's typically 3 cases that a school district will encounter when it comes to the coronavirus, right? So it's going to be the school will be notified of a COVID positive. The school will be notified of a person, whether it's a staff member or student who's quarantined, or the most common one that we've been hearing and we were hearing all throughout is something called the contact of a contact. And based on those 3 scenarios is, again, the way the communication would go out to the community. And in some cases, and we just want to be as upfront with this as possible, most, if not all of that communication will be coming from the Department of Health, because we have to protect the person's rights, right, under HIPAA and a bunch of other laws. And that's where I think sometimes people get a little bit unsettled, is because they're not hearing the communication coming directly from the district. And we have to understand that a lot of that is protected under HIPAA regulations, right? So the Department of Health and what they're colloquially known as their disease detectives are the ones that are making those notifications to the families or to the people that they feel, again, the Department of Health feels need to be notified, right? And that's how that communication is going to come out. It really won't be coming from the district. Okay, and that I think is just something that really, people have to understand, because again, if we don't know, then we start to, nature abhors a vacuum, right? We start filling it with the things that we don't really know. So the Department of Health has a bunch of great resources. The Putnam County Department of Health is fantastic, and as Dr. Banlow said, I mean, way prior to us closing, we were talking with them at some points almost on a daily basis. So they have been very, very available to us. They have been very, very forthcoming with the information that they have, and willing to really just help share and marshal the resources when it comes to that level of communication. And then when that student or that staff member is out, then again, off of the Department of Health guidance and off of their medical director and the family or the staff member's physician, then the next steps will be determined, whether it's a COVID test ordered, whether it's multiple COVID tests, whether it's just isolating or quarantining for 10 days. But all those decisions really are from the medical professionals, not really from the school. The school has a really black and white, set of guidance that they have to follow. And that guidance does come from the local state Department of Health, as well as the CDC. So thank you. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. Dr. Kennedy, did you want to add anything? I know the nurses have been undergoing training all summer. They've been excellent. I think Frank covered it, but Dr. Kennedy, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't have anything else to add. I do think that Frank summarized everything with the protocol. Our nurses do have very clear steps prescribed by Dr. Corsaro to follow if someone, is suspected to be ill. And so from the health perspective, they have very clear protocols already in place to follow in their office or in the quarantine area if needed.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Kennedy and I work very closely together. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. So let's go to the next question. So what is the mechanism for closing school? So I think Frank kind of highlighted that a little bit. Frank, do you have any thoughts here that you can add to this question?
I do, yes. So mechanism for closing school. Basically, I go back to the Department of Health recommendations. So right now, and Dr. Banlow, I think you brought it up a little while ago, all of these issues will be handled on a case-by-case basis, right? So that's the first thing to understand, right? To give you for instance, a student that was in the school or a staff member that was in the school for 7 hours is going to warrant a different response from the Department of Health than a contractor that may have come and shown up on campus and checked the oil levels in the tank outside the building. So there's all these different levels of scenarios that may happen. But in the event that there is a COVID positive case in a school, the language that we're using is that there will be a probable, but not a definitive closing for anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. And Victor brought it up a little while ago, when we talk about the cleaning, people think that the 3, 4, and 5 days is really to, do some kind of super sterilization or whatever it might be. It really isn't. The time is really for the Putnam County Department of Health and the State Department of Health to do their disease detection and to do their contact tracing. Right? We do, again, if there was a case in a room, the room might be sealed for a day, just to let it sit for a day. But the cleaning products that have been identified are the cleaning products, and they work as they work. So if there is a virus on a table or a desk, which is a very low probability as far as we know at this time, but if there is, that's where the cleaning product will work regardless. Right? So that's really what that closing is for, is to allow the contact tracing to take place. So that's really the scenario where a school would close. Okay. But again, all the precautions that are being taken, right, help to lessen that probability.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, next question. Can I change my mind in terms of the mode of learning that my student is engaged in? So Dr. Gosh, you want to answer this one?
Sure. Just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, if you are in the all remote learning option, we're asking that you stay in that all remote learning option until the end of the first semester, which is about the end of approximately the end of January. If you start in hybrid, and again, conditions in your circumstances within your family change or conditions throughout the region change, and you say, I'm just not comfortable anymore, I want to do full remote, you can do that. But once you're in all remote, you're in it until the end of end of January, end of the first semester.
Okay, thank you.
I can take this one as well if you'd like.
Thanks.
The answer to this question is it depends. So if my son or daughter's ill, it's their in-person day. We selected hybrid, they're ill, it's their in-person day. Can they do remote learning? At the high school, the answer is yes, because it would just be fluid in that way. The middle school, the answer is in all likelihood no, because you would have your core versus on-core. You have a different set of classes on your remote versus in-person day. And K-5, it might be more difficult. There might be more asynchronous activities that might be done, but we need more information about what option students and parents are choosing in order to fully answer the question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gosh. How will IEP services be delivered? What about 504 accommodations? Dr. Kennedy?
Okay, good morning. So the answer to this is complex and similar to what Dr. Gosh just mentioned. It does depend on each individual IEP or 504, which we will be reviewing on a case-by-case basis. And as Dr. Banlow mentioned earlier, this overall situation that we're in is one that is very fluid. The results of the parent survey being distributed this week will help us get a better idea as to how many students will be working remotely, how many will be participating in the hybrid model this year, and which students may possibly require daily instruction at the start of the year or at some point during the year, as soon as we can reasonably and safely bring them back every day. So once we have the information from the parent surveys, we're going to be better able to look at the building space, determine what physical supports would be needed in order to bring students with IEPs or 504s in more often than currently planned. And we just want to mention that we realize that this overall situation is particularly challenging for our students with special needs. We're very committed to doing everything that we can to help every student get off to a great start this year and make progress within the parameters of the guidance issued by SED and the Department of Health. We're going to do everything that we can. So within the hybrid model, IEP services will be delivered both in person and via remote instruction. The same will occur with 504 accommodations. Across all the models, instruction is going to be differentiated according to individual student needs. In addition to this, our approach as a whole PPS department this year is going to include a heightened emphasis on the development of executive functioning skills, which Dr. Gosh spoke about earlier in the presentation. We're going to be working even more diligently to help our students with special needs develop their organizational skills, their ability to initiate tasks independently and follow through with them, as well as be adaptable and flexible. These are skills that will help them prepare to effectively participate and be successful across the instructional models. For all students with IEPs and 504s, when in person, our teachers will teach and support their progress as digital learners and help them to adjust if there comes a time where we need to be fully remote. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that our students are prepared if there is a sudden change to their program and they need to adjust to that. All of this educators supporting student IEPs or 504s are going to be informed of the students' recommended program modifications and testing accommodations prior to the start of the year for students, and the requirement that these are to be provided to the extent possible while on virtual learning and certainly in person as well. We're making sure that every student has access to the necessary technology in order to use their device in school or at home. The individual technology needs of classified students were reviewed at each student's annual CSE held this past spring. We have our 504 annual review process coming up in the fall, as we do every year. And our district assistive technology consultant, Ms. Schneider, has been very helpful. She maintains frequent collaboration with our PPS administrators, our special ed staff, parents, and students in order to make sure that every device is equipped with the necessary apps and programs that support each student's individual learning needs. When needed, we're also prepared to provide physical materials for students to use at home in order to continue with their instruction. As a leadership team, we're planning for our PPS administrators and CSE chairs to meet with the special ed instructional staff and non-instructional staff on at least a one-time monthly basis to provide direction, to provide resources. We will be continuing to provide information to parents verbally and in writing with translation support as needed. Depending on each student's individual needs, we may call for a program review of the IEP or 504 to further determine what supports are appropriate as we move forward. We're going to monitor progress through digital and other assessment options. And as always, we welcome parent input throughout the process. We invite parents to contact us regarding any questions or concerns as we move forward. Thank you to the parents who have reached out to us so far. Our conversations have helped us to refine plans for supporting each individual student. We're committed to doing this for everyone and welcome anyone who has concerns to please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to collaborate with you on how to best navigate this situation.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. And parents, I want you to know that Dr. Kennedy and her department are strong advocates for their special education students. And as she said, as we get our surveys back and we look at the space, we want to be able to bring back as many students as we can safely. So safety is clearly was from the surveys our first priority. But thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Will the school day be shorter? Okay, Dr. Gosh, you want to take this one?
Sure. So the teacher day remains the same. The school day might be a little bit shorter depending on the grade level. Pickup and drop off times might change slightly. But again, we're working to get all that information to you as soon as possible. Mrs. Smith at the transportation department has a great plan. We just need information from you about what option you're taking. If you we don't want to assign every student a seat if there is X percentage that are going to choose remote learning. Those are more students that we can give a seat to on the bus and that we can accommodate. And I'm talking about transportation about this and the school day being shorter because the reason why the school day might be shorter for students is because of the transportation needs. But we're not talking hours shorter. We're talking minutes. And once we have the specifics of what this looks like, and once we work out any contractual items, we will be able to give more specifics on what the actual times are.
Thank you, Dr. Gosh. And that reminded me that parents can also drive their students to school. Your building principals will be navigating that and sending out information regarding student drop-off. As you can imagine, we'll probably have a lot of parents driving their child to school. So the principals have already mapped out different paths and different entryways for students. So you'll be hearing from them regarding that. So what about shared supplies, library books? This is a great question. I have to say our PTO presidents, I meet with them on a monthly basis right when this pandemic began. They came out with a great idea of creating individual supplies for each of the students. So I want to thank them as well. So Dr. Gosh, you want to talk a little bit about what we've talked about with shared supplies, library books, and we tapped into Dr. Casaro as well.
We did. So the building principals will be working with their staff to figure this part out. We want to minimize the amount of shared supplies, whether that's art supplies, whether it's classroom supplies. So we're going to have to restructure how we do some things. But this is on our radar. We want to make sure we minimize the amount of supplies that are shared. If that means curricular modifications, then we do that, because again, it's about health and safety. In terms of library books, Dr. Casaro also advised us on this. At this point, once library books are returned to students, returned from students to the school, we're going to let them sit for a week. That way there's no disinfecting that's needed. There's nothing else that is needed. So students will still be able to check out books, might not be at the same frequency, but that will be a service that is still afforded to our students.
Thank you, Dr. Gosh. And as you can imagine, as we've been walking through this, we plan, we answer questions, but many more questions come up. So our principals, as you can imagine, have a lot of questions they want to consult with Dr. Casaro and Frank on. So they're actually going to be meeting with them on Thursday to answer numerous questions that continue to come up, just to make sure we're doing everything we can do for the safety of our students and staff. Okay, why do you not have a deep cleaning day? I'm going to pass this to Mr. Carlson.
Sure. So as we described earlier, a lot of the cleaning products that we had used in the past and continue to use are already effective against the coronavirus. And again, there's no greater potency that we're using in terms of our cleaning supplies Of course, we're using additional cleaning supplies than we had in the past, but really it's not necessary to have a deep cleaning day. Frank Guglieri mentioned earlier about shutting down for a few days if necessary. And as we've learned throughout the process, that the virus itself dies on a surface after a certain period of time. So it's not a requirement that we have a deep cleaning day, and it really doesn't improve our operations in doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. When can we return to 5-day in-person instruction? So this is a great question, and we would love to do this. It's also it's difficult for us to do this via Zoom, by the way, because we wish we could see all of you in person. But the answer to this question, of course, will come from the state, will come from the governor, will come from the guidelines from State Education Department, and also it'll come from the State Department of Health. So we have to follow that guidance right now. And I know we're all hoping that there will be a very safe vaccine in the future, but as Mr. Carlson mentioned, we continue to learn more and more about this virus. There's still so much we don't know. So we need to follow that medical guidance. Okay, when will mask breaks be built in? How will younger students handle this? I know our building principals will be talking to you about this at a building level, but Dr. Gosh, is there anything else you want to add before we go to the next question? Because I know our principals will be talking about this as well.
Yes, definitely. Just that one of the assurances that we provided to the state is that we provide, again, explicit instruction in hygiene to our students. So this will be not just, us figuring out when mask breaks can fit in and what that looks like, but also talking to students about how to handle when they have to sneeze and they have a mask on, and all the different things that students do on a daily basis anyway, now that are a little bit more complex because they have masks, that will be incorporated into our instruction as we move into and throughout the school year.
Thank you. Why aren't in-person classes running 5 days per week? And I think we already pretty much answered that question before, so I won't bore everybody with the same answer. Okay, how will we orient students to the new building processes? So Dr. Gosh talked a little bit about this. I wanted to let parents know that Frank has been working with the region, Frank Guglieri, they're creating at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES videos, safety videos that we're going to be posting on our website for families to view. So you'll be seeing those going up shortly. He has been tremendous. In addition, I have just as an example, Mr. Carlson is working with our food services department, Kathy Hancock, working with Mary Smith at transportation. They are also creating videos, so we can dig deeper into this. You could really see what will happen for students. And we will be working very, very closely, even when the kids come on campus, as Dr. Gosh said, to orient them. Can I drop my student off at school as opposed to taking the bus? And yes, I had spoken about that before. You will hear from your building principals. There will be definitely a student drop-off.
And Dr. Banlum, likely changes in procedures to accommodate all the changes, right? And that will be
Absolutely
by the building principal once we have results regarding how many students are choosing the all remote versus the hybrid option.
Yes. And okay, so I'm going to say thank you. And what I want to just, before we close, I want to thank everyone, our SHEP committee, all of our focus groups, all the parents who gave us information surveys, the hundreds of questions that came in. I want you to think of this as a funnel. We're starting at the very top. We're giving you the broad information. We're not done giving you information. We're not done answering your questions. So after our presentation this morning, if you have more questions, please send those in to us. We are continuing to update our FAQ on the district website, so please go to the FAQ as this evolves. It is a fluid, it is a working document. We're going to be continuing to funnel down with information with building principals and directors reaching out to you, in addition to providing videos, so that we are making sure that we are answering the questions with the guidance of Dr. Casaro and Frank and the Department of Health. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Please keep those questions coming in. We are here to support you. We are partnering with you. We want to help you make this very, very important and very difficult decision. We're family. We are a Brewster family. So thank you for joining us today. And please have a great day. You can certainly join any of the other information sessions we have coming up, one at noon and one at 5:30. Thank you.